Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Onos, and today we're going to dream. We're going to talk about possibilities. So this is something that had already crossed my mind in the past, but when Cronus commented on one of the videos a few days back with an idea about the future for Nioh 2, it caught my attention and kind of dragged my brain back onto the topic. So as with all theories and progressive thinking, you start with a problem, then look for a solution, or a possible solution. I mean, maybe solution is the wrong word in this case. Improvement? Development? Anyway, so starting with the problem. What's the problem with Nioh 2? And don't be getting all excited and smashing your faces on the keyboard in the comments. I'm not bashing the game. You'll see from my playlist, I've now done well over 50 videos for Nioh 2. So you could say I'm pretty invested. That said, nothing in this world is perfect, and the problem I see at the moment is with co-op play. Co-op play in Nioh 2 at the moment is, well, it's okay. It's decent, it's a fun way to help out other players, but let's be honest, it's not the most technical of playstyles. It's chaotic. 3 players all wailing away at the boss at the same time, running around like headless chickens and trying to outdamage each other. I feel like it could be so much more. Co-op play at the moment doesn't offer a challenge. Again, it's great for helping newer players or tricky boss fights, etc. But anyone who's hit Endgame and spent a little bit of time making a half-decent build, co-op play doesn't really offer much in the way of a challenge. The rewards are all RNG based. I've heard it rumoured that you can get better gear from co-op play, but I wouldn't be confident saying that's a guarantee. So with the DLC coming out at the end of July, there's a good possibility they'll bring Abyss back, which from everything I've read would be welcomed by the community with open arms. But again, any co-op play in Abyss will most likely be more of the same. Summoning players at random, praying they're good enough to help you with progression. No real way to communicate with each other, and depending on the difficulty, no real need to communicate with each other either. So okay, I can hear you thinking, is this a rant? What's the point? I'm getting there, just bear with me. The dream. And this could be a pipe dream, but hear me out. I don't think we're a million miles away from this being possible with the current setup we've got. I'll tell you why that is after I've explained what I'm talking about. Okay, so has anyone here played an MMO? Something along the lines of World of Warcraft is what I'm thinking about. I know there are more recent games, but World of Warcraft was the baseline, and the reason I say that is it's based on their dungeons. Stick with me for a moment. So for a base level dungeon in Warcraft, you needed a 5-man team. It needed a specific setup for each team to make it work. You needed a tank, a healer, and 3 damage dealers. The tank is basically a meat shield. Someone to take the enemy's attention and the lion's share of the damage so the rest of the team can get their job done. A tank can't put out much damage in most cases, but his job was to hold the enemy aggro. He had to be set up to take the punishment and keep the boss away from the others as much as possible. If the boss decided to go smack the healer in the face, 9 times out of 10 the healer was dead. Healer dies, team dies, and you have to start over. So it's the tank's job to stop that from happening. So the healer's job is to keep the tank alive. Tank dies, it's a wipe, no one else can take the punishment. The healer also has to heal the entire team through area of effect damage too. If you lose your damage dealers, then you never make it through. And the damage dealers, their job is to get in position and unload on the boss and take him down as quickly as possible to take the pressure off the tank and the healer, who are basically just buying time for the damage dealers to finish the job. It was a proper team effort, everyone had their role to play. In some dungeons, there was a time mechanic built into a boss. It was kind of like a gear check to make sure the team was equipped to deal with what the dungeon had to offer. 5 minutes into the fight, for example, the boss would do something that's so powerful there was no way to survive it. It would be a team wipe, so the damage dealers had to put him down before that happened, which basically makes it a damage race. You needed the whole team to perform in order to get past that challenge. You had area of effect attacks that the whole team would have to dance around to avoid. One member of the team might be responsible for debuffing the boss at a certain point to avoid the whole team taking massive damage. You get the idea. So okay, maybe I'm getting way too excited, but stick with me. How could we come close to this sort of thinking with Nioh 2? And what would be the benefit to us and to Team Ninja? First we'll talk about how. In terms of achieving this, from a team perspective, we already have some of the nuts and bolts in place. The tanking abilities, for example, are already there. We have an attribute called Easy Target, which can be added to armor pieces. Easy Target basically tells the enemies, hey, this guy's easy meat, let's take him down first. All you would need to take advantage of this is for the guy with the easy target on his armour to be set up to take a beating. Massive health pool, high armour, good elemental resistances, high block rate, etc. He doesn't need to do much damage. All he needs to do is stay alive and keep the attention of the enemies. The fact that easy target is in the game already says to me that Team Ninja must have given this some thought, or at least considered the concept. So the healer, okay, this is tricky. We currently have the ability to create a support class, someone with their Omnio magic abilities set up so that spells cast effects over other players. The healer, or support, could offer defense and lifesteal, for example, for the whole team. Again, the facility for some of this is already in place. In theory, if the magic user is powerful enough, they may be able to help keep the team alive through various encounters. We may need to see some more direct healing abilities put into play to really make this work, but in theory, again, some of it is already in place. The damage dealers? Well, that one's easy. We just need to be putting out as much damage as possible. Most people are already doing that, or attempting to. In my example with Warcraft, your damage dealers would either be melee or ranged. We have those options already. Ninjutsu users, Omnio mages, even some crazy bow and cannon builds I've seen. There's your range classes right there. The only change needed would be to allow them a way to hold more ammo. So okay, the basic team structure is kind of there. It's not too far away to consider. Some tweaks may be required, but you get the idea. So what would we need from Team Ninja to make this viable? We'd need a few things. The Abyss would be a good start, but realistically, we need the content. We would need content where it isn't possible to complete it on your own. Bosses and enemies would need to hit hard enough and be tough enough so that one person can't make it through on their own. We would need enemies with a health pool so big that it takes at least 3 people to take them down. Ideally, we would need boss mechanics so that after a certain amount of time, it would just instantly kill people, so that you can't get past the boss if you don't have the combined damage to do the job. That way, it would stop a tank going in there on his own and chipping away at a boss for 10 hours to take him down solo. Second, we would need an incentive to do it. Rewards for the players. Imagine if the loot for a full dungeon completion was a chance to get something like a plus 12 weapon or an armor piece, for example. That would save someone hours of grinding, and they could easily soul match their new gear so that it's useful and relevant for whatever setup they've got. Or even a real incentive, unique armor pieces. They wouldn't need to be game breaking, they could just be cosmetic. Something you could show off and say, I've completed X achievement. Or maybe having a smithing text as a potential reward, so that you could go build yourself a new gear set specifically for tank or healer class to help with future achievements. You could have leaderboards with dungeon clear times. That would give people with a competitive nature something to aspire to. You get the idea. Third, we would need a way to find a group. You would need to be able to specify if you're a tank, a healer, or a damage dealer, and have some way to jump into a group. That's why the incentives would need to be there, otherwise the population of players interested would be too small to make this work. I know all of this sounds like a huge change to the game, but I feel like we already have a lot of the elements in place to make the beginnings of this idea work. Co-op already exists, Abyss is potentially already on the way. All we would need is the functionality to put a team together which includes the right elements. Ideally, we'd need to be able to group up as friends rather than just random players, and make sure we're able to talk to each other if there were harder or more technical encounters. Even if Team Ninja weren't in a position to facilitate the communication side of things, we could find workarounds for that. I won't pretend to understand servers or all the background details needed for something like this to work from a technical perspective, but given they've got co-op already, I would assume it's not too far out of reach to consider some kind of technical matchmaking. Okay, so from Team Ninja's perspective, what are the benefits? Why would they want to do this? And this is the bit that I really hope they hear about. For this to happen, it would need to be financially viable for them, right? The devs don't work for free, and nor should they. Everyone needs to make a living. In theory, Team Ninja could charge for this, couldn't they? If the game headed in this direction, first of all, it gives us a proper challenge after we've hit the end game. It's a sort of thing they could continue to add content to, without having to release a major DLC every time. It could extend the potential lifespan of the game exponentially. Imagine if they charge people an optional $5. How much money could they put behind this if people wanted it? You don't have to buy in, but if you did, you get access to the new dungeon each time. Imagine if even a quarter of the player base were interested in trying this out the first time around. That's well over $1.2 million right now, and that's before it's even released on PC. Now imagine if Team Ninja invested enough energy into this to make it worthwhile for the player base every month. Imagine what they could do with $1.2 million every month. Imagine if once per month, or however often they managed to do it, they were to release a small DLC which included a new dungeon with new bosses, introduce new cosmetic loot, or higher tiers in gear as an incentive for us to go through and progress. It could be a way to group up and farm higher plus level gear, with a higher RNG chance to get something decent. The idea would be that anyone can meet the requirements for entry to the dungeon, but to achieve higher levels without going into the more difficult content would take more time. They could put a dummy in the dojo to test your damage output, and we could, as a community, set benchmarks for damage levels to make sure people knew what they needed to hit before being viable for a certain boss. So yeah, I know I'm dreaming here, but can you imagine the possibilities? Everything they could do with the game, and half of the stuff we need to achieve this is already there. It already exists in the game, but no one is bothering to use it because there's no need. Co-op right now isn't a challenge, so why would anyone think, you know what, I'll be the tank for this one. I'm going to put easy target on my gear and help the team out. I'll drag the boss out of the fight while the others take his minions down. I actually considered making a build for this ages ago when I first spotted the easy target attribute, but then I saw what co-op was like as things stand and I figured I'd be wasting my time. There's just no need right now for solid cooperation or strategy, so what you're left with is players in co-op mindlessly spamming abilities and rushing from one encounter to the next with no thought of consequence. In a real dungeon, if one of the damage dealers runs off on his own into the next area, he's dead. Simple as that. If the healer gets caught on his own, dead. If the tank had no backup, he'd last a little bit longer, but he'd still be dead in short order. The basics of this already exist, guys. It's already in the game. What we need is the challenge, the incentive, and the mechanics to organise a proper team. I personally think this could be a huge opportunity for both us and for Team Ninja. Obviously, I know nothing about the game's infrastructure, so I can't comment on if it's viable from a server perspective, but I'd love to think that this could be a viable idea. There hasn't been a game with a half-decent dungeon mechanics for so long, and Nioh 2 has an awesome foundation to build on. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd be curious to see if this is something anyone else other than me is interested in. Thanks again to Cronus for prompting me about this. I'd put the idea aside, but I do feel it's worth talking about. Just before we wrap things up, I've taken John's advice, thanks by the way, and finally started a Discord server. God knows how I'm going to find the time to manage it properly, but I'll worry about that if it becomes a problem. I'm going to attempt to get more active on Twitter too. Links for both the new Discord server and my Twitter account are in the description if you fancy joining me. As always guys, your likes and comments are really helping the channel to grow. The constant engagement is humbling and I'm really grateful. Thank you to all my existing subs. Your support is in the process of turning this channel into a real thing rather than just a half-baked attempt, which is how I began a few months ago. Right guys, I hope you enjoyed the video, far-fetched as it may seem. I'll leave it there. Thank you for joining me. See you again for the next one. Take it easy now. Bye bye.